There's a quality I want to describe that I think, or I find that people who approach awakening in this way, approach awakening with this quality at the forefront of their experience, they do better, so to speak. What I mean by that is things seem to move more fluidly for them. They have less likelihood to get stuck in their mind, less conceptual types of questions they ask. Things seem to move more spontaneously for them. Often when you hear about somebody having an awakening that just seemed to come out of the blue or seemed sort of effortless, and that sounds frustrating to you because you feel like you've put in so much effort, it's because of this quality. And it's a simple description I'm going to give for it, but I want to unpack it, or really I just want to give you the feel for what I'm talking about. So if you can really feel into what I'm pointing to here, this can be really helpful, I think, before and after awakening, initial awakening. And it's compatible really with any process or technique or approach or background or tradition. It's not something that negates anything really, but it's a quality of, perhaps I could say, approaching life. It's a quality of perception or attention that really makes a difference. I really try to look at those factors that seem to differentiate people who struggle a lot with awakening, or for whom it just seems like such a prolonged process. I try to contrast that with people for whom it seems to unfold pretty rapidly. And there are salient differences. This is a bit of an aside, but I have seen this not just in the awakening world, but in a lot of different areas where we will see that for some people, a certain thing takes longer, or it's more difficult or more challenging. And then for other people, it seems simpler, more straightforward, and so forth. And we conclude that it's just luck, or it's just the luck of the draw. But I think in many cases, it's not actually the luck of the draw. There's something that they're doing. And I've had a lot of evidence to support this, in that by putting these videos out, by talking about this subject, by talking about ways to approach this possibility, a lot of people are waking up, and it really seems to work. So there are methods. There are things that are different between, I think, people who really struggle with a lot of this, or really can't break out of conceptuality and resistance patterns and so forth, and people for whom this does seem to unfold more rapidly. Now, it's not easy for anyone. I mean, this process, even if you do have a quick sort of awakening, or awakening out of the blue even, it doesn't mean that person just experiences birdies and bunnies and crunchy granola, like everything's just easy and straightforward for the rest of their life. It's not like that. In fact, as I've said, sometimes when you have a deep, especially spontaneous awakening out of the blue, it can be really, really challenging, because then what you've done is you've cleared one layer of identity, and what's underneath is a lot of reactivity, resistance, misunderstandings, delusion, habit force that's potentially self-destructive, and so forth. So now you're left with all of that, and it comes directly into the forefront of consciousness. So that can be really challenging as well. So I want to be clear that there's not a better or worse about this, but it is clear to me that sometimes people tend to open quicker than others. And there are definitely reasons for that from what I've seen. There are aspects to their approach that are different, and this is one of them. So I beat around the bush long enough, and I'll just say it, but I will unpack what I mean by it, and that is openness. Openness. What I can tell you is, from my own experience in my younger life, that was not a quality I had, I don't think. Certainly about the relative world. I was reasonably closed. I I was very narrowly focused, and that focus was in thought. Meditation for me, for a period of 4 or 5 years before awakening, was helpful. It was helpful to allow me to kind of start to sense what openness was, to cultivate some openness, specifically during meditation. It did spill out outside of meditation. It spilled over into ordinary life, but to a small degree. I was still rather closed in my views, my opinions, my mental processes, my attention focus. When I talk about having an open aperture of attention and so forth, I didn't have that at all. So it definitely required me to sort of soften to some degree over a few years. And then when the inquiry started, there was just so much desperation and pain that the inquiry was fueled by that. And I won't get into the nuances of this, at least in this video, but also during the inquiry, as things started to shift, as I started to perceive what it felt like to move beyond the conceptual self, to move beyond the illusory small self, that there was a component to this that required this kind of radical openness. And the openness perhaps was a result of a very challenging situation I had found myself in life. I kind of felt a rug pull, which allowed me to recognize that there's this openness available that I had been ignoring. So this kind of openness I'm talking about isn't quite as much a doing as it is a recognition. And as I said at the beginning, just feel into what I'm saying, and you may find this in your life. You may find this in your experience. And then you can cultivate it by just reminding yourself of it. But it was something like an openness that was already here that I hadn't noticed somehow. I had overlooked noticing it because I had focused my attention so narrowly in thought. And then when my attention was almost always in thought, but when it wasn't in thought, it was still narrowly focused and bounced back into thought quickly. And yet, as I was inquiring and as this awakening was starting to unfold and the identity structure was starting to shift, there was clearly this discernment of a kind of openness. I didn't name it openness. I didn't go, oh, this is openness. But experientially it was obvious. There was something vast, something far more spacious than I remembered experiencing for many years. It was a spaciousness, okay? You also can find this. You can recognize that it's here, even if it's just to a small degree. You can also ask yourself, what here is already wide open? Or is there an openness that's just already the case? It doesn't close. It doesn't open and close. It's just open, right? You can ask yourself this. You can take a walk and just look and see, where's the openness? How's the openness feel? Or is there openness here, even if my mind is trying to narrow its focus, right, into thought or something? And just that mere acknowledgement, even if you taste it for a second or half a second or longer, but I mean, just that mere acknowledgement that, yes, it is here. Okay, yes, I feel it and I've touched into it. That's far more powerful than you probably realize, well, than many people realize. Because there's like an ancient remembering that happens here. Again, like an old memory, but not a thought memory, a more feel memory, or an instinctual remembering of something that's not actually in time. It's always here. It doesn't come and go, right? So even though it feels like, oh, I haven't experienced this in a long time in the relative, maybe since childhood or something, or maybe even before, may feel like that. Paradoxically, it's already here. It's just here. Perhaps I could say that this openness is really the portal, or it is closely related to timelessness, because it really is. The openness is, in one sense, every time. It's all times. It's not subject to time. It's not bound by time. It's not stuck within time. So this openness, cultivating it, recognizing it, remembering it, recalling it, feeling it, and also feeling anything that's perhaps getting in the way of it. Meaning, if you start to touch into this openness, maybe in the way I spoke of, where you take a walk or you're doing something simple, simple activity, or sitting, and you just ask, is there an openness here that is always there, always the case? Can I sense openness right now? Even if the mind is doing what it's doing, right? Because this openness isn't contingent upon thought or lack of thought. If you taste that and something touches in, it may feel like wonder or openness or awe, or may even feel sublime. And then it may also lead to a bit of like a recoil, like almost a bit of fear, because it is so vast, right? And maybe the mind that is so used to being narrowed to thought, into analysis and judgment, it kind of goes on tilt a little bit, or it just gets a little tweaked. And that's okay. You may also notice a bit of fear around it or something like that. And that's okay if you feel it, just feel that. That's okay too, right? But know that if you start to sense either of these experiences, one of openness, wonder, expansion, even timelessness, or a kind of bit of a fear response, either one is okay. They're fine. Nothing's gone wrong. And even if the glimpse or the feeling of that openness or that expansiveness is very fleeting, nothing's gone wrong. It's fine. It's just how this goes often. But cultivate, feel into this. Carry the intention through different environments and see if in some spaces, in some environments, it's more prominent than others. Maybe when you're listening to music. Maybe when you're doing yoga. Maybe when you're taking a shower or a bath. Maybe right before you fall off to sleep. Or even maybe right when you wake up. Who knows? Could be any time. But that's the openness. The openness is being open to whatever appears. Being open to whenever the expansion, the clarity appears. Instead of closed, narrow, insistent on an outcome. Yeah. Because we can fall into that with spirituality as well, right? We can imagine what awakening is like and enlightenment and endlessly question, why haven't I gotten that yet? Why haven't I gotten there, right? And I laugh because it's so paradoxical in a way, right? It's like those very thoughts that feel so sticky and compelling, asking why I haven't gotten there, those are exactly why you're not experiencing it, right? Because it's right here, you're already there. It already is the case. But I understand those thoughts can be so compelling. When you notice those, though, when you notice those seeking thoughts, those insistent thoughts or judgmental thoughts, judgmental about yourself or others, it's okay. Even in that space, even in the space of thought, you can just look into it and see, is there a kind of openness here? Right? Sometimes we talk about space around the thoughts or space between the thoughts. Openness within consciousness. Is it here? How does it feel? Without description, without self-description. You don't need to describe it to yourself, but just how does it feel? Openness. Letting anything in, letting anything move through that needs to move through. Or just noticing that there's nothing left out. This kind of openness. If you feel frustrated or narrowed in your attention, or like awakening's taking too long and you're kind of obsessing about that or something, just start cultivating this openness and don't worry so much about those thoughts, right? Because in truth, realization is already here. Enlightenment is already here. You're not going to get to it through thoughts about when it's coming and why you're frustrated about it, right? So even when you notice those thoughts, even if you notice frustration around the thoughts or resistance, just ask, is there some openness here? Some wide openness, some fluid openness, some oceanic vastness. Feel it. Hear it in the sound and what is not the sound. What is the sound and what is not the sound? Notice that. That's the openness. What is the sensation and what is not the sensation? There's openness there. So yeah, cultivate some openness and see if that doesn't change the quality of your experience and or your focus on thoughts, about seeking thoughts specifically.